In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the CAGED system and combine it with the pentatonic scale to play over chord changes. Typically, when you're first learning how to solo, you're basically just playing the pentatonic scale along to the key of the song. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using the CAGED system to actually be able to target notes from within the chords. And it's actually a lot easier to do than you might think. By the way, I just released a little handbook called the Guitarist Companion. It's got a bunch of cheat sheets for like all the chords inside of every single key, all the major scales, all the intervals, and a bunch of other helpful stuff. If you want to grab it for free, just follow the link at the top of the description. So there are only two things you really need to know to get through this lesson. The first one of those things is the basic minor pentatonic scale shape. So we will be in the key of C major to start, or A minor, and the scale shape looks like this. And you're only going to need a very basic understanding of CAGED. And all CAGED is an acronym that represents all the different types of chord shapes we can make on the guitar. So that means every single chord that we play anywhere on the fretboard, it's going to come from a chord shape based on the C, the A, the G, the E, and the D. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to play a very little version of every single chord from within a key inside and around that pentatonic scale shape. So that means that while you're in that position, playing that pentatonic scale, playing a solo, you'll also be able to see and visualize every single chord from within that same key. So in our key of C major / A minor, we have 7 chords that are naturally occurring within the key, chords we call diatonic chords. And these chords are all gonna sound good together, right? So chords like F major, G major, A minor, C major, D minor, right? Those all sound nice because they're all from the same key. And with our basic understanding of CAGED, we're gonna be able to play all 7 of those chords inside of this pentatonic scale shape. So chord number 1, our C major, the shape is going to look like this, right on top of that minor pentatonic scale. And this little 3-note chord is called a triad. Call it a triad. So this is a C major chord or a C major triad. And you might be wondering, where exactly does this come from in CAGED? Well, technically, we're just playing a little piece of the A shape, right? A shape C major chord. Also, we're playing a little bit of the G shape. So, right, it exists in both of those shapes. And that'll be the case for all the shapes I'm going to show you here, is they're going to be small little versions of the larger shape. Chord number 2 is going to look like this. Again, a nice little shape existing inside that minor pentatonic scale. And it's coming from this chord right here. That bar chord that you probably already know. We're just playing the little one like this, so it's technically an A shape, right? Because it's a little A minor shape right there. And you can see with this shape, we're actually playing notes that aren't exactly in the pentatonic scale. And that's because we're technically playing notes from the major / minor scale. So a pentatonic scale has 5 notes. A minor / C major pentatonic is the 5-note version. We remove 2 notes from the major or minor scales. So the full major scale, the full minor scale, they both have 7 notes. We're just adding those 2 extra notes back into the scale to be able to play these chords. Next up, we've got chord number 3, which looks like this. And the numbers are really important here, right? This is an E minor chord. It's the 3 chord of the key of C major. But the numbers are what are important because when we move this into different keys, the whole shape, our pentatonic scale, all the shapes are going to remain the same, which means the 3 chord in our new key is also going to look like this, just in a new position. So again, those numbers are really important. And believe it or not, this little triad here actually comes from a C minor shape, a shape you don't see used too often, but technically that's what this is. Now for chord number 4, I like this little shape right here. It's just a little D shape. You can play it like this, right? So you recognize that as your D chord. It is the 4 chord of C major, so technically that is an F chord, right? Then moving to the 5 chord, the G chord, we just take that exact same shape and we just slide it up 2 frets. Looks like that. Again, we're living right inside that pentatonic scale, but we do have some added notes, which again are from the major / minor scale. Next up, we've got our 6th chord shape, which is an A minor here, and it's going to look like this. Just like that. You can play it. You don't have to bar if that's not comfortable for you. I usually bar it. And it's just coming from an E minor shape, right? That creates our A minor bar chord, but we're only playing those 3 notes Onto our 7 chord, not to be confused with 7th chords, but the 7th chord from within the key. This is actually the weird chord. It's a diminished chord technically, and it usually doesn't get used that often in music, especially like pop music. It's more of like a passing chord it'll sometimes be used as. So the shape I'm gonna show you here is a 4-note shape. It's gonna look like this. Okay, technically, that right there is a B minor 7 flat 5. Like I said, you're probably never really gonna use it, but it's worth knowing anyway. Okay, so now what we have is we have our pentatonic scale, and we have our individual chord shapes from the key. So now we're gonna combine these two things. And when you solo or just play over top of a song, you're playing over top of a chord progression. And for a lot of guitar players, the way their mind kind of works is when they are playing rhythm guitar, they are playing the chords. They're following the chords in that chord progression. But then when they go to solo and play lead, they're just playing the scale. Right? And they're not thinking so much about the chord part. What we're gonna start doing is we're gonna start paying attention to the chords. And so what we can do now is as the chords come along and as they change, we can play that chord, that little version of the chord from within our shape. And the idea here is especially on the chord change, so when it lands on the new chord, is to hit 1, 2, 3 of the notes from that chord within this scale shape that you've just learned. Then as you start getting comfortable with that, you're gonna start adding notes from the pentatonic scale in between. So the idea would be, here comes the next chord change. I land on what we call one of our chord tones. So one of the notes from within the chord. Maybe I play that, I play one of the other notes from within the chord, then I do a little pentatonic lick, and then the next chord change is coming, and I'm gonna land on the chord tones from the little shape that I've learned on that next chord. So I'm gonna show you all this in action by putting on a track and playing along to it. Now, there's something you need to know, that this track is actually in a different key. So we're in the key of A minor / C major. They're the same key, they're just relative major and minor keys. But we're gonna be going into the key of G major. And what that means is all of our shapes have to get shifted into our new key. Now, if you have an acoustic guitar, this might make this a little challenging just because of where we're going on the fretboard. But if you have an electric guitar, it's no problem, because to be in the key of G major, we have to slide this whole thing up to the 12th fret. To know what key this shape is in, we look at our pinky finger on the low E string for the shape that we already know. Our pinky finger tells us the major key, and our pointer finger tells us the relative minor key. So this is a G note, right? So that means this is G major / E minor. They're the same key, relative major and minor key. So all of our shapes are gonna remain the same. They're just moved into this new position, and that's why the numbers matter so much, because we have to be thinking in numbers more than just the actual chords we're playing. Okay, here comes the track. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is identify the chords. I'm gonna assume that you already know what the chords are of the song you're gonna be playing over. I have videos that show you how to figure them out if you don't know them. For all the tracks that I'm gonna give you access to in this lesson, I'll have written out what the actual chords and the key are to make it easy. So we're in the key of G major, and the chords here are going from G major to C major, the whole track, okay? To C major, to G major. We're in the key of G major. That means we're playing the 1 chord to the 4 chord. Okay? So if I were to use my shapes inside my pentatonic scale, 1 chord coming up here, it's these ones. Right? They fit. To my 4 chord, this little D shape. And just practice going back and forth here. This track is definitely a good one for just getting the feel of it, because it's nice and slow. We're going 1 to 4. Pretty simple. And then what we know we can do is play the pentatonic scale over this. Sounds nice, right? And then we can combine them together. This might be tough, so we play this. Land on the shape. And you don't have to play the whole chord when you land, you can just play 1 note. So I can just play one of the random notes from the chord. And then if you know more stuff from pentatonics, so connected scales and things like that, you can start adding those in. And that is it. The idea is hitting those chord tones and knowing where they are when you're playing over a certain chord, when you're playing over the 1 chord, when you're playing over the 4 chord, and in other tracks, 5 chord, the 6 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, even the 7th chord, and knowing how to quickly locate the notes while still being in a comfy pentatonic position. Now I'll have this track along with a few others available for you to download totally free. There'll be a link at the top of the description if you want to grab them. And along with those tracks, I'll actually have a little information sheet for you so that you can see what the chords are, what the changes are, because obviously this one's simple, right? We go from a 1 to a 4. The other ones are not complicated, but they are going to add a few more things into the mix. Just make sure you remember my tip about positioning yourself in the correct key. So where your pinky is the major key, where your pointer finger is the minor key while using this pentatonic shape. So if I need to play in the key of E major, I play this shape right here because my pinky will land on an E note. My pointer finger will land on a C sharp note, meaning that my relative minor key is C sharp minor. So this would be E major / C sharp minor. One of the tracks is in this key, so this is where you would position that. And it's gonna throw a couple other chords into the mix, so just be prepared to play those other shapes you've learned as well. So as far as next steps, I think it's pretty obvious. You wanna be doing all this same stuff over different chord progressions in different keys. So I'd recommend grabbing those jam tracks down below, starting with those. They'll be a really good place for you to start. One other thing I'd recommend is checking out my lesson called Improvising Guitar Solos for Complete Beginners. A lot of this stuff at the beginning is gonna be pretty simple. You're probably already gonna know it, but a lot of the stuff that comes a little bit later, I think will be really helpful for you. I'll have a link to that up in the middle of the screen for you if you wanna check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.